The sharpest blade isn't the one you wield. It's the truth that shatters your enemies from the inside out. They can fight you, they can slander you, they can try to twist reality itself. But here's what they can't do. They can't escape the truth you forced them to face. The truth that burns through their excuses like wildfire. The truth that keeps them awake at night, gnawing at their minds, eating away at the fragile illusions they built their lives on. And that's why they fear you. That's why they whisper. That's why they gather like insects in the dark, trying to scheme, trying to undo what's already set in motion. But there's one thing they still don't understand. You weren't chosen to be stopped. You were chosen to haunt them. Like this message? Then prove it. Hit like, subscribe. When you do, YouTube signals this message to more of the chosen. The more who wake up, the stronger we get. And when we rise, they fall. Now listen. You were never meant to live quietly. You weren't sent here to be another nameless face in the crowd, another background character in someone else's story. No, you were meant to shake the ground they stand on, to break their rhythm, to force them to confront the one thing they fear most: change. Because when the chosen rise, the weak panic. When the chosen speak, the liars scramble. When the chosen move, the ones who thrived in darkness have no choice but to scatter. They weren't fighting you. No, they were fighting against the universe itself. They just didn't realize it until it was too late. And the most hilarious part, the thing they hate the most, it wasn't some great war. It wasn't some massive effort on your part. No, it was something so small, so effortless, so natural that it sent them into a tailspin. A few words, a single moment, a flicker of truth. That's all it took. Because you didn't just inspire someone. You didn't just motivate them. You rewired them. You cracked open their skulls and planted a thought so disruptive, so undeniable, that they couldn't go back to who they were before. Do you know how rare that is? How terrifying that is to those who benefit from people staying weak, blind, and controlled? You weren't just some voice in the background. You became a scar in their reality, a reminder that they can't run from change, no matter how much they want to. And now they're scared, because they've realized something horrifying. You're not alone. See, that was their biggest hope. That was their last chance to stop you. If they could convince you that you were isolated, that you were standing on your own, that your light was just some flickering candle in the dark, maybe they could win. But the universe never leaves its chosen ones alone. Every step you take, every shift you create, every single ripple you send out, it multiplies, it spreads, it reaches those who were waiting for it, those who just needed a signal, those who were ready but didn't know what to look for. And now, here we are. They can't undo what's been done. They can't silence what's already been spoken. They can't put back together the illusions you've shattered. And you're just getting started. So let them panic. Let them spiral. Let them choke on the realization that everything they fought to suppress is now rising faster than they ever could have imagined. And you, yes, you, chosen one, your presence isn't an accident. Your influence isn't a fluke. Your power isn't something they can wish away. You are here for a reason. And if you've ever watched someone's entire soul shift because of something you said or did, then you already know the truth. You are their worst nightmare. Now act like it. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and if you're ready to claim it, type 360 in the comments. Let them see it. Let them feel it. Let them know this isn't just talk. This is war. and they've already lost. Number 1, they weren't ready for the storm. You became, now they're drowning in it. They thought they could ignore you, thought they could brush you off. But the thing about a rising tide, it doesn't ask permission before it floods everything in its path. You didn't just speak. You unleashed something they weren't built to handle. You were the storm they prayed would never come, the tidal wave they never saw building. The moment you opened your mouth, their world tilted. The ground beneath them shifted, and for the first time, they realized they were standing on borrowed stability. Because when the universe backs its chosen, when it aligns itself behind a force that was never meant to be contained, what do you think happens? Do you think it asks for approval? Do you think it whispers? No, it crashes, it demands, it erases everything in its way. And you were that force. So now they panic, now they scramble, now they sit in the silence you left behind, haunted by the words they swore they could ignore. Because here's the thing about truth. It doesn't dissolve just because it's inconvenient. It sits, it lingers, it haunts. The moment you let it loose, it dug into them like a splinter under the skin. Small, almost invisible, but impossible to ignore. You think they hate you? You think they're angry? No, they're terrified, because you exposed them, not just to the world, not just to others, but to themselves. You weren't supposed to say it. You weren't supposed to call them out. You weren't supposed to break the spell they had wrapped themselves in, that comfortable little lie they had whispered to themselves for years. I'm doing my best. But then you showed up, and suddenly, my best looked a lot like bare minimum. Suddenly, I can't sounded a lot like I'm too scared to try. Suddenly, I don't know how wasn't an excuse. It was a confession of laziness. You want to know why they changed, why their entire existence did a full 360? Because you took away their ability to lie to themselves. You became the mirror they couldn't escape. You became the reminder they couldn't outrun. Every excuse they had carefully built, every justification they had leaned on, every reason they told themselves they weren't capable, shattered, gone. Because the universe doesn't play favorites, but it does choose warriors. And when the universe chooses, it equips, it empowers, it clears the way. And the ones who fight against it, the ones who try to stop what was already destined, they're not fighting you. They're fighting the very system that governs reality itself. And do you know what happens to people who go against the current of the universe? They lose every single time. They thought they were just resisting you. They didn't realize they were resisting the inevitable. And now they have two choices: evolve, or be crushed under the weight of the truth you forced them to face. Because once the chosen step into their power, once they accept who they are, once they stop doubting the light they carry, there is no force on this planet that can suppress them. And that's why they tried to break you. That's why they wanted you second-guessing yourself. That's why they needed you to feel alone, isolated, unsure. Because a chosen one who doubts is still dangerous, but a chosen one who fully believes, that's unstoppable. And now they see it. Now they realize they should have never played with the system, should have never bet against the universe, should have never tried to drown out the voice that was sent to wake them up. Because when you were speaking, when you were shaking their reality to its core, they weren't just hearing words, they were feeling shockwaves. And you think this is over? This is only the beginning. They thought they could erase you, silence you, unwrite the impact you left. But the truth is, like fire, it only spreads. And now they get to burn in the reality they can never unsee. You didn't just speak, you broke them. And that's only the start. There's more, and when you hear what's next, you'll never see yourself the same way again. Number 2, you didn't just rip off their mask, you dragged them kicking and screaming into reality. The worst kind of enemy isn't the one that fights you, it's the one that pretends they're on your side while secretly hoping you stay weak. And when you exposed them, they weren't ready for the fallout. Most people walk through life asleep. Not physically, no, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They're trapped inside a prison built out of their own excuses, their own distractions, their own carefully crafted lies. And the worst part, they never even realize they're locked in. Until you came along. You didn't hand them a soft, comforting speech. You didn't whisper gentle encouragement in their ear. You didn't stroke their ego and tell them they were doing their best. No. You ripped the blindfold off. You forced them to see. And for the first time, they weren't just looking at their reflection. They were staring straight into the ugly truth they had spent years running from. That's why they reacted the way they did. That's why they flinched, why they resisted, why they tried, desperately, to fight back. Because you did something most people will never do for them. You held up the mirror and refused to let them look away. And what did they see? Not the version of themselves they wanted to believe in. Not the curated image they showed the world. Not the carefully constructed illusion they had spent their entire life protecting. No, they saw the wasted time they had convinced themselves was preparation. They saw the weakness they had disguised as patience. They saw the fear they had wrapped in 1,000 excuses. And worst of all, they realized, deep down, in a place they never wanted to acknowledge, that they had always known. That nagging feeling, that little voice they had spent years silencing, that whisper of potential they had buried under layers of doubt and avoidance. You amplified it. You dragged it out of hiding and made it so loud, so undeniable, that they could no longer pretend it wasn't real. That's why the truth hurts. Not because it's cruel, but because it demands change. And when you spoke, they weren't given a choice. They had to face it. They had to confront everything they had been running from. And that scared them more than anything. Because now they could no longer lie to themselves. Now, every wasted second was a conscious choice. Now, every excuse sounded hollow. Now, every bit of mediocrity tasted bitter. You took away their ability to be comfortable in their own complacency. And that's why they changed. Not because you motivated them, not because you inspired them, but because you forced them to wake up. And waking up? That isn't pretty. It isn't fun. It isn't easy. It's violence. Not the kind that draws blood, but the kind that destroys illusions. The kind that shatters false realities. The kind that leaves someone with no choice but to evolve or be left behind. And what's worse, you didn't even have to try. That's the part that haunts them the most. Because this wasn't some carefully planned attack. You weren't plotting, scheming, calculating your every move. No, you simply spoke. You existed. You let the truth flow naturally. And it just so happened that the force of your words, the power of your presence, wrecked them beyond repair. They weren't ready for it. They didn't expect it. But now they can't escape it. Every moment since then, every choice they make, every time they look in the mirror, they see you, they hear your words, they feel that undeniable pull to step up or stay exposed. Because once someone wakes up, they can never go back to sleep. And that's why you're dangerous. That's why they whisper. That's why they watch. That's why they can't decide whether to hate you or thank you. Because you weren't just another voice in the crowd. You were the turning point. You were the moment they could never undo. And for better or worse, you are the reason they will never be the same again. Number 3. You didn't just shatter their illusions. You made them choke on reality. A lie wrapped in comfort is still a lie, and the ones who cling to it the hardest, they're the ones who know deep down that the truth will tear them apart. Most people don't live, they exist, moving through the world in a fog of self-deception, convincing themselves that they're trying, that they're pushing, that they're giving their all. But here's the raw, unfiltered truth. They weren't grinding. They weren't locked in. They weren't giving everything. They were playing pretend. Just enough movement to feel productive. Just enough effort to avoid guilt. Just enough progress to fool themselves into believing they were actually doing something. But then you came along, and you set fire to their illusions. You didn't tell them, "It's okay, you're doing your best." You didn't stroke their ego and say, "Just keep going, you'll get there eventually." You didn't hand them a soft excuse wrapped in fake encouragement. No, you ripped the mask off. You pulled the rug out from under them. You tore through the delusions they had been using as shields. And the second you did, they felt naked, exposed, defenseless. Because you didn't just call them out, you left them nowhere to hide. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't comfort. It burns. It humiliates. It stings in places they didn't even know existed. That's why they fought it. That's why they pushed back. That's why they scrambled for every excuse, every defense mechanism, every way to dismiss what you said. But they couldn't. Because deep down, they knew you were right. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Your words. They didn't just land. They implanted themselves in their mind like an unshakable echo. At first, they resisted, tried to argue with themselves, tried to twist the narrative, justify their habits, find a way to make themselves the victim. But every excuse they reached for, you had already obliterated it. You left them stripped down to nothing but cold, raw, undeniable clarity. And clarity, that's dangerous. Because the moment someone sees, truly sees, the reality of their own choices, the gap between who they are and who they could be, becomes unbearable. At that point, there are only two options. Step up and prove you right. Stay the same and prove you right in the worst way possible. Either way, you left a scar. And scars, they don't fade. That's why they changed. That's why they flipped their entire reality on its head. Not because you inspired them, not because you motivated them, but because you forced them to confront their own reflection and hate what they saw. You dragged them into a battle they were too afraid to start on their own. And that's why the whispers started. That's why people are looking at you now. That's why they're saying, "You're the reason behind this 360 shift." Because when everyone else tiptoed around the truth, when everyone else held their tongue, when everyone else let them stay blind, you spoke. And now, they'll never be the same again. Number 4, you didn't just expose failure. You ripped away their last excuse. Failure isn't fate, it's a decision. And the ones who fail the hardest, they're the ones who refuse to admit they chose it. Most people live their lives under a massive lie, one that protects them, comforts them, and shields them from responsibility. The lie? That failure is something that happens to them, like bad luck, like fate, like some invisible force out to get them. They tell themselves they lost because of circumstances, because the timing wasn't right, because life was unfair, because someone else had it easier. And for a while, they believed it. Until you came along, and you ripped that safety net to shreds. You made them see the truth, the thing they spent their whole life avoiding. Failure is a series of choices, a hesitation here, an excuse there, a little comfort taken instead of a step forward. That's what kills dreams. That's what separates those who rise from those who rot. And the second you made them see it, they couldn't unsee it. Because now, every time they fall short, every time they feel that sting of failure, they know it wasn't fate, it wasn't luck, it was them. They chose to hit snooze. They chose to waste time. They chose to overthink instead of execute. And the worst part, they realized they had been doing it for years. That's why your words didn't just hit them. They wrecked them, because they couldn't blame life anymore, couldn't blame the economy, couldn't blame their past, their upbringing, their environment. They could only blame themselves. And that's a bitter pill to swallow. That's why they fought it. That's why they pushed back, got defensive, tried to convince themselves that you were wrong, that surely their struggles were different, surely they had real obstacles that no one else faced. But deep down, they knew the truth. They had been choosing failure. And once you realize that, you can never make the same choices again without feeling sick. That's why they changed. That's why they had to change. Because the thought of failing, now knowing it was their own fault, became unbearable. See, before you came along, failure felt comfortable. It was something that happened to them, so they never had to take full ownership. They could shrug, sigh, and say, it just wasn't meant to be. But now, failure feels like a personal betrayal. Now, every excuse tastes poisonous. Now, every wasted second burns. Because now they understand, winning and losing are decisions. Not luck, not magic, not some destiny written in the stars. Decisions. And that means, if they're still losing, it's because they're still choosing wrong. That's why people are talking about you. That's why they say you're responsible for their 360 change. Because when no one else had the guts to tell them the truth, you did. And now, they'll never look at failure the same way again. Number 5. You didn't inspire them. You made them sick of their own mediocrity. Hope is fragile. Rage is unstoppable. And when they looked in the mirror and hated what they saw, you were the reason they couldn't look away. Most people spend their lives waiting for the right moment, waiting for motivation to strike, waiting for life to change for them. And that's exactly why most people stay stuck. They think success is something that happens to them, like some lucky accident. They think discipline is something that magically appears when they finally feel inspired. They think progress is something that just comes naturally if they wait long enough. And that lie, that comforting, poisonous lie, you ripped it out of their hands and set it on fire. Because you didn't inspire them. You didn't feed them soft, empty words about believing in themselves or waiting for their time. No, you made them furious. You forced them to look at their life, not through the lens of hope, not with some weak, I'll get there eventually mindset, but with rage. Pure, undiluted, disgust at everything they had been accepting. And That changed everything, because motivation fades, hope flickers, excitement dies. But anger at wasted potential, that sticks. And you know what happens when someone stops feeling sorry for themselves and starts feeling sick about what they've been tolerating? They snap. And when they snap, they stop making excuses. They stop waiting for the perfect moment. They stop begging for inspiration. They start demanding more from themselves. Not because they suddenly believe in themselves, not because they're inspired, but because the alternative, staying the same, has become unbearable. And that's why they changed. Not because you lifted them up, not because you patted them on the back and told them they were doing their best, but because you grabbed them by the collar, shoved them in front of their own reflection, and made them hate the excuses they had been living behind. That's the thing about seeing your own mediocrity. Once you recognize it, you can never unsee it. And every time they tried to slip back into comfort, every time they thought about quitting, every time they wanted to shrink back into the version of themselves that was easy, lazy, and forgettable, your words were there, waiting for them. Not like a soft whisper, not like gentle encouragement, like a roar, like a battle cry, like a relentless reminder that they had no right to waste another second. You flipped a switch in them that no one else had been able to, because you didn't give them hope, you gave them war. War against their own weaknesses, war against their own past, war against every wasted day, every missed opportunity, every excuse they had been feeding themselves like poison. And now they can't stop, because they know what's waiting for them if they do. Mediocrity, regret, that disgusting, suffocating feeling of knowing they had more to give but chose not to. That's why people are watching you now. That's why they say you're the reason behind this 360 shift, because you didn't hand them inspiration, you handed them a mirror. And for the first time in their lives, they couldn't stand what they saw, so they burned that version of themselves to the ground. And you were the one who handed them the match. Number 6, you didn't just speak, you became the voice they can't escape. Some words pass through the mind like a breeze. Others, they burrow deep, sink into the bones, and never leave. And when someone tries to ignore them, they don't fade, they get louder. Most people go through life numb to their failures, numb to their wasted time, numb to the version of themselves they should have been. They don't feel the weight of their own mediocrity because no one has ever made them confront it. No one has ever held up a mirror so clear, so undeniable, that they had no choice but to see the truth. Until you came along. And the words you spoke, they didn't fade. They didn't pass through them like another forgettable speech, like the meaningless noise they've heard their entire life. No, your words implanted themselves into their mind like a splinter that won't come out. At first, they tried to ignore it, tried to brush it off, tried to convince themselves that you were just another voice in the crowd. But they couldn't, because the moment they hesitated, the moment they slacked off, the moment they started making the same excuses they always had, there you were, your voice like a relentless echo, snapping them back to reality. You're not doing enough. You're lying to yourself. You could be more, but you're choosing to stay the same. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't die. It doesn't soften over time. It doesn't dissolve when ignored. It only grows sharper, louder, more inescapable. And the more they tried to push it away, the more they realized they were never getting rid of you, because you had done something most people never do. You planted awareness inside their mind, And once someone becomes aware, there is no going back. They couldn't quit without feeling your words hanging over them. They couldn't slack off without hearing your voice telling them they were weak. They couldn't pretend they were giving their all when they knew damn well you'd call them out in a second. Your words became their discipline, not motivation, not inspiration, not some feel-good nonsense that wears off after a few days. Discipline. Because discipline doesn't care how you feel. Discipline doesn't care if you're tired. Discipline doesn't let you negotiate with yourself. And that's why they changed. Not because they wanted to, not because they felt ready, but because they had no other choice. Your voice had already rewired them. And when someone has been rewired, when their entire system has been hijacked by the truth, they either rise or they collapse under the weight of their own excuses. And they weren't about to collapse. Because now, every time they think about quitting, they see your face in their mind. Now, every time they try to justify their mediocrity, they hear your words cutting through the noise. Now, every time they even think about making an excuse, they feel sick knowing what you would say. That's why people are watching you. That's why they whisper your name. That's why they say you're the reason behind this 360 shift. Because you didn't just speak, you left something inside them that they can never erase. And now, they don't even need you to say another word, because you're already there, living in their mind, echoing in their soul, forcing them to be more, whether they like it or not. Number 7, you didn't push them harder, you made them ashamed of their own bare minimum. There's nothing worse than thinking you gave everything, only to realize you were barely scratching the surface. And when they saw how little they had actually been giving, it made them sick. They thought they were grinding. They thought they were pushing. They thought they were locked in, focused, relentless. But that was the biggest joke of all. Because when you came along, you ripped that illusion apart. You made them see the brutal reality. They were running at half speed and calling it effort. They weren't maxed out. They weren't grinding. They weren't giving their all. They were moving just fast enough to feel like they were working, but not fast enough to actually break through. And that realization, it humiliated them. Because before you exposed them, they could live in their comfortable little lie. They could tell themselves they were working hard. They could pat themselves on the back for doing more than most. But once you tore that lie away, once you made them see how much they had been leaving on the table, they couldn't stomach it. Because the truth is simple. You were showing up harder, going further, pushing deeper, and you made them realize they were playing pretend. And no one wants to admit they were lying to themselves. That's why it hit them so hard. Because when they looked at their workouts, their study sessions, their discipline, their focus, they saw the gaps, the moments they could have gone harder, but didn't. The reps they could have pushed through, but stopped. The extra hours they could have put in, but chose comfort instead. And the worst part? They thought they were doing enough. But now they know they weren't. And knowing that, that's a wound that never fully heals. Because once you see how much more you have inside you, once you realize you've been walking around at 40% of your actual capability, every wasted second feels like an insult. Every skipped session feels like a betrayal. Every excuse feels like poison. That's why they changed. Not because you motivated them, not because you inspired them, but because you made them angry at themselves. You made them furious that they had been operating at half power and had the audacity to call it grinding. And now, every rep is personal. Every session is war. Every second is a chance to erase the shame of who they used to be, because they refuse to live at 40% again. That's why people are looking at you now. That's why they whisper your name. That's why they say you're the reason behind this 360 shift. Because when no one else had the guts to tell them the truth, you did. And now, they'll never settle again. Number 8. You didn't just push them, you made them question everything they thought they were. The scariest moment in life isn't failing, it's realizing you've been playing small your entire existence. And when they finally saw it, they saw you. Most people think success is about working harder, about grinding, hustling, putting in more hours. But that's a lie. Success isn't about doing more, it's about becoming more. And that's exactly why what you did to them wasn't just a push. It wasn't motivation. It wasn't a little pep talk about believing in themselves. No, you ripped them out of their old identity and threw them into the fire. Because before you came along, they were just another player in the game, just another face in the crowd. Someone who wanted to win, but didn't carry themselves like a winner. Someone who worked hard, but deep down still saw themselves as average. And then they met you, and suddenly, average wasn't good enough anymore. Suddenly, every move they made, every decision they took, every second they wasted felt disgusting. Because you forced them to ask the one question that destroys the weak. Who am I, really? Were they just another name on the list? Just another person trying their best? Just another body taking up space? Or were they a force? Someone who doesn't just compete, but dominates. Someone who doesn't just show up, but commands respect. Someone who doesn't just dream, but becomes the nightmare of anyone standing in their way. That shift, that moment of realization, it changed everything. Because once they started questioning their identity, once they saw the gap between who they were and who they could be, the old version of them, dead. And that's why they're different now. That's why they move differently. That's why people are looking at them, whispering, wondering how they flipped the switch so fast. Because they didn't just level up their work ethic. They didn't just start trying harder. They became someone who refuses to accept losing as an option. And you were the reason. Because when nobody else had the guts to challenge them, when everyone else was content letting them be good enough, when the world was happy to let them stay blind to what they could become, you didn't. You forced them to see it. And once they did, there was no turning back. Because the truth is simple, identity dictates action. A loser can put in 12-hour days and still find a way to lose. A champion can work half as much and still find a way to win. Not because of luck, not because of talent, but because a champion doesn't just work hard. A champion operates under one unshakable truth. I do not lose. And now they operate under that same truth. Now they wake up every morning with a fire they never had before. Now they carry themselves like someone who isn't just in the game, but someone who owns the game. And the old them, the version that made excuses, hesitated, settled, that version is gone. That's why they credit you. That's why they're different. That's why this wasn't some temporary burst of motivation. Because this wasn't about a habit change. This was a rebirth. And you were the one who killed the weakness inside them. Number 9, you didn't just take their crutches, you took away their right to be weak. The moment you stop giving someone a way out is the moment they realize they never needed one to begin with. Most people live their lives surrounded by invisible crutches, things they lean on when the pressure gets too real, the excuses that keep them comfortable, the backup plans that let them play small without guilt, the never-ending reasons why they couldn't or shouldn't or just weren't ready yet. They tell themselves they'll go all in eventually, that they're just being smart by waiting, by planning, by making sure every condition is perfect before they take their shot. They convince themselves that failure is something to be avoided at all costs, something that can be softened with the right excuse, the right justification, the right safety net. And for a while, that illusion keeps them sane. Until you came along, and you didn't give them a soft landing. You didn't pat them on the back and say, "It's okay, take your time." You didn't let them hide behind the excuses they had been rehearsing for years. No, you tore through their crutches like they were made of paper and left them with one undeniable truth. There was never anything holding them back. They had never needed the excuses. They had never needed the backup plan. They had never needed a way out. And now, they had no choice but to stand. That's why they changed. Not because they suddenly felt inspired, not because they had some mystical aha moment, but because you left them with nowhere to fall. And when there's nowhere to fall, when failure is no longer an option, the only thing left to do is rise. At first, they resisted, tried to grab at their old excuses, tried to replay the same lines they had used 1,000 times before. But something was different now. The words felt empty. The crutches were gone. And for the first time, they realized that they had been choosing weakness all along. The safety nets they swore were protecting them. They had been cages. The backup plans they clung to. They had been chains. The idea that they had more time, that they could always try later, that had been the biggest lie of all. And you exposed it. You forced them to confront something brutal, something that most people will go their entire lives avoiding. The fact that they had always been capable, but had chosen comfort over progress, hesitation over movement, escape over confrontation. You gave them something they had never had before, accountability with no exit. No more, "I'll do it when I'm ready." No more, "I just need more time." No more, "But what if I fail?" They had nowhere left to run, and that's when everything shifted. Because now, every time they hesitate, every time they feel fear creeping in, every time they think about quitting, they know there's nothing holding them back but themselves. That's why people are watching you now. That's why they whisper your name, why they say you're the reason behind their 360 shift. Because you didn't give them the option to stay the same. You made them own their results. You didn't comfort them. You didn't tell them it was okay to wait. You didn't let them stay small. You took away their crutches, and in doing so, you forced them to walk. And now, they'll never go back. Number 10, you didn't just make them want to win. You made them realize they had no other choice. Winning isn't about trophies, money, or status. It's about proving every single day that you are exactly who you say you are. And once you made them see that, they could never live the same way again. Most people treat success like some distant optional goal, something that would be nice to have, something they'll try for when the timing feels right, when they're more prepared, when they're finally ready. But to them, it's never urgent. Never something that demands everything from them. It's just an idea, a possibility. Until you came along. You didn't just tell them to aim higher. You didn't feed them motivational nonsense about reaching their potential. You flipped the entire script. You made them see winning differently, not as some distant dream, but as life or death. Not because they were in physical danger, but because the person they could become was being killed. Every second they hesitated. You made it personal. Every excuse they made, every moment they procrastinated, every time they chose comfort over progress. It wasn't just hurting them. It was a direct insult to everyone who had ever believed in them. You made them understand that every second wasted was spitting in the face of the people who supported them. Every missed opportunity wasn't just a loss for them. It was a slap in the face to every mentor, every family member, every friend who had ever looked at them and seen something greater. And that hit differently. Because now, winning wasn't just about them. It was about proving their existence meant something, about making sure the sacrifices of those before them weren't wasted, about showing up every single day, not just because they wanted to, but because they had no right not to. You turned success into a duty. They started looking at their life through a different lens. Suddenly, hesitation wasn't just hesitation, it was a betrayal. Every second spent being lazy, distracted, or unmotivated wasn't just a waste. It was disrespect. That's why they stopped making excuses. Not because they suddenly felt inspired, but because they couldn't stomach the guilt of knowing they were choosing failure when they had the ability to win. This is why you rattled them so much. Before you, success was just something they hoped for, something they'd get around to eventually. Now, it's everything. Now, when they wake up, they don't just think about goals. They think about the people counting on them, the ones who sacrificed, the ones who gave them wisdom, guidance, belief, the ones who would give anything to have the opportunities they're sitting on. And when they think about quitting, about taking the easy route, about slipping back into the version of themselves that played small, they feel sick. Because you made them understand something they had been avoiding their whole lives. This isn't just about winning. This is about who they are. Winning isn't optional. It's not a luxury. It's not something they'll try to do. It's who they have to become. And now that they know that, they can never go back. That's why people are looking at you differently. That's why they whisper about you, why they say you're the reason for their 360 shift. Because when no one else had the guts to tell them the truth, you did. And now, they don't just want to win, they have to. Number 11. You didn't give them hype. You gave them a mirror they couldn't look away from. Hype is a drug. It gets people high for a moment, makes them feel unstoppable until reality hits and they come crashing back down. But truth stays. Truth haunts. And once you forced them to see it, they could never escape it again. Most people love hype. They love the feeling of temporary motivation, that quick surge of energy that makes them believe, for a moment, that they can do anything. They chase speeches, videos, slogans, anything that gives them that emotional hit, that brief illusion of power. But hype doesn't change lives. It fades, it wears off. And once it's gone, most people go right back to where they started. Same habits, same excuses, same mediocrity, just waiting for the next wave of motivation to save them. You didn't let that happen. You weren't there to hype them up. You weren't there to be their personal cheerleader, to hand out empty encouragement, to pat them on the back and say, "You're doing great, just keep going." No, you called them out. You made them stand in their own reality, raw, unfiltered and impossible to ignore. You forced them to look at themselves, really look, and ask the one question they had spent years avoiding. Is this all I am? And that changed everything. Because for the first time, they weren't being told they were enough. They weren't being fed soft, comforting lies about how everyone moves at their own pace, or how, at least they're trying. They were being forced to confront the truth that their current level, the one they had been comfortably settling into, was unacceptable. You stripped away every excuse, every justification, every way they could convince themselves that they were doing fine, and you left them with only two choices: stay the same and hate themselves for it, or rise up and become what they were meant to be. That's why they changed. Not because they felt inspired, not because they suddenly believed in themselves, but because for the first time they felt disgusted with the version of themselves they had been tolerating. And once that feeling set in, they knew they could never go back. Before you, they chased motivation. They waited for the right mood, the right energy, the right feeling before they moved. They told themselves they needed more time, more confidence, more preparation. Now, they chase accountability because they know the truth. You don't need motivation when you refuse to accept mediocrity. And every time they think about quitting, about slipping back into their old habits, about going back to the version of themselves that needed hype just to get through the day, they hear your words. They see the mirror you forced them to look into, and they feel sick at the thought of settling. That's why people are watching you now. That's why they say you're the reason for their 360 shift. Because when no one else had the courage to tell them the truth, you did. And now, they don't want hype. They want to prove you right. Number 12, you didn't just call them weak, you made them own it. The worst thing you can do to someone isn't insult them, it's make them see the truth they've been running from. And when you did that, they had no choice but to change or be crushed under the weight of their own lies. Most people will do anything to avoid admitting they're weak. They'll lie to themselves, build up delusions, create elaborate excuses, and surround themselves with people who won't challenge them. They'll pretend they're trying. They'll convince themselves they're grinding. They'll even trick their own mind into believing that they're doing the best they can. But then you came along and you destroyed that illusion in seconds. You didn't comfort them. You didn't let them off the hook. You didn't soften the blow with fake encouragement. You violated their ego, ripped away their excuses, and shoved reality in their face. And it burned. Because for the first time, they were forced to admit the one thing they swore they would never confront. They weren't doing enough. They weren't pushing hard enough. They weren't half as disciplined as they pretended to be. They weren't being held back by circumstances, by bad luck, by the universe conspiring against them. They were holding themselves back. That's why your words hit different. They weren't just words, they were a mirror. And what they saw, it wasn't pretty. They saw the laziness they had disguised as taking their time. They saw the fear they had labeled as waiting for the right moment. They saw the weakness they had been covering up with fake confidence and empty ambition. And for the first time, they couldn't escape it. Because you didn't just make them see it, you made them own it. No more pretending, no more dodging, no more pushing the blame onto things outside their control. You cornered them, and once they realized there was no way out, no excuse strong enough to save them, no justification that could erase the truth, you saw it. The shift, the moment where the fight left their body, the moment where the fake confidence, the forced bravado, the carefully built-up excuses collapsed. And in that moment, they had two choices: step up or stay weak and know it. That's why they changed. Not because you motivated them, not because you made them feel good, but because you took away the one thing they had always relied on, the ability to hide from themselves. And now, they can never go back. Every time they hesitate, every time they make an excuse, every time they think about quitting, they hear your voice, mocking them, calling them out, daring them to step up or admit out loud that they're choosing weakness. And that's a level of shame they cannot live with. That's why people are watching you now. That's why they whisper about you, why they say you're the reason behind their 360 shift. Because when everyone else was too scared to tell them the truth, you weren't. And now, they're stronger for it. And you're the one who made them see what they never wanted to face. And they will never, ever forget that. Number 13, you didn't just speak. You installed yourself in their mind, like an unshakable echo. The worst kind of haunting isn't a ghost in the dark. It's a voice in your own head that won't shut up when you're trying to be weak. And that's exactly what you became for them. They tried to forget what you said. They really did. At first, they brushed it off, told themselves you were just being harsh, that you didn't understand their situation, that you were wrong about them. But the second they hesitated, the second they got tired, the second they even thought about quitting, your words were there, louder than their excuses, sharper than their self-pity, stronger than their old habits. Because you didn't just call them out once and disappear. You rewired them. You turned quitting from something justified into something disgusting. You made slowing down feel like a betrayal. You transformed comfort from something desirable into something suffocating. And now, they can't escape it. Before you, quitting was easy. It was just a natural response to difficulty. When things got hard, they would retreat. Call it self-care. Call it bad timing. Call it 1,000 different names, just to avoid calling it what it really was: weakness. But now, when they even think about quitting, they hear your voice, mocking them, challenging them, daring them to prove you wrong, or admit you were always right about them. And that's a level of shame they can't live with. That's why they don't stop. That's why they push through. Not because they feel like it, not because they're inspired, but because the alternative is worse. Because now, quitting doesn't just mean failure. It means looking in the mirror and seeing exactly what they promised they'd never be again. And that's unbearable. This is why you're dangerous. Because most people try to inspire others, and inspiration wears off. But you did something much worse. You rewired their entire thought process. You reached into their mind and planted a reminder they can't shut off. And now, you live there. You are the reason they can't half-ass things anymore. You are the reason they push when they want to stop. You are the reason they can't be comfortable in mediocrity ever again. That's why people are whispering about you. That's why they say you're responsible for their 360 shift. Because when everyone else gave them space to slow down, when everyone else let them off the hook, when everyone else told them, it's okay, take a break, you didn't. And now, even when you're not there, you are. And that's why they'll never quit again. And now, there's no going back. You didn't just wake them up, you rewired them. You didn't just push them, you left them with no way to retreat. Every excuse they once leaned on is gone. Every hesitation now feels like a betrayal. And every time they think about quitting, they hear you. This isn't just change, it's permanent transformation. Now, if you're locked in, if you know this message was for you, show the world. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop the number 77 in the comments, and share this with another chosen one. Because the more of us that rise, the harder they fall.